Welcome to Cut to Legal.
Welcome to Cut to Legal. I'm your host, John Clements, here with entertainment attorney James Pacitti, a veteran entertainment lawyer and founder of Pacitti Law Firm. He's represented producers, production companies, actors, directors, writers, composers, and creators at every level of the business, from indie features to documentaries and multi-platform projects. Today's episode is legal steps to take before filming your movie or TV series. But first of all, James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk with you because this is new to me. I've talked with a lot of lawyers, but never with an entertainment lawyer. So this is new ground. So I'm excited. But before we get to your specialty, I want to know about you, James. Let's start with your story. How did you get into entertainment law?
My origin story. I guess that's appropriate for entertainment law. I took an unusual path. I'll try and make it a quick. It is a somewhat long story, but I'll make it short. About 25 years ago, I was a trial attorney and a litigator, and I was encouraged to take acting classes for trial work because there is an emotional threat in any trial. So it is something I was a little resistant to at first, but I said, all right, I'll give this a shot. Improve my trial work. And as it so happens, it actually led me to stumble into entertainment law because in the course of taking these classes, I was contacted, the teacher of the class was contacted by an independent film production, and they were looking for an attorney to do production legal. And even though I had never done that before, for some reason I said yes. And I ended up getting assistance from one of my law partners, and ended up doing the production legal on this independent film, which actually then led to a couple more independent films. And it opened up a new world for me. And so a couple of decades ago, I did a pivot and I moved out to Los Angeles and began an entertainment law practice, initially focusing on production legal, but now we've expanded it to where we handle all aspects of finance, development, production, and distribution for creatives.
Well, thank you for that. It's amazing to me how sometimes those decisions you never think were going to lead anywhere lead into a completely different career choice. And so that's really cool. And I want to dig into that with you today. What's the first legal step a content creator should take after they come up with a project?
Well, it depends what you mean by come up with a project. When somebody just has an idea, for example, ideas don't have any legal protection just in and of themselves. Ideas that are original, expressed in a tangible fixed form, have automatic copyright protection. It's called common law copyright. So for example, if you write out a one-page synopsis, there's copyright attaches to that. However, if they truly want protection, once it's something more substantial, for instance, once you write a feature-length script, a full script, it is strongly advisable to register that script with the United States Copyright Office. Some people will do a registration with the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. That establishes a temporal basis for the creation of the project. So if there's ever a question of who created something first, but doesn't confer any additional legal protection, whereas registering with the U.S. Copyright Office does give additional rights and remedies.
Okay, so basically, if I have an idea and someone else comes up with the same idea, then I'm just out of luck. But once I take that next step to write the screenplay and then to go get it registered, then that's kind of where the legal protection starts.
Exactly. Just an idea. Ideas are floating out there. There are exceptions. There's something called an implied in fact contract that if you're an entertainment professional and you go to a studio or a network or a streamer and you pitch an idea, and it's established in advance that I'm proposing this idea to you, studio executives, for example, on the basis of that if this turns into something, you're going to compensate me. So those are called pitch meetings. And even though someone might not have something written out, it's more advisable to do so because obviously there still can be issues with that, even if you're dealing with a legitimate producer, a studio, or network. So that's an example where an idea could have protection, but not under copyright law. It's under contract law. But for your typical, you could say creative, whether it's a writer or otherwise, it's good to express it in writing. And once it is something developed, you should register it with U.S. Copyright Office.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. And also along with that, what about like forming like a business entity around that project, like an LLC, for example? Is that something that is important to do?
Eventually, it is. It's something that it will give you. There's obviously a number of advantages to operating with an entity. One, there's the legal protection that goes along with it. As long as the person who forms it or the persons who form it adhere to the corporate formalities, and that's being, have separate bank accounts, they act as separate entities. So there's legal protection. It also can be tax advantages depending on the nature of the entity that's formed. And it's typically LLCs or corporations. LLCs are very popular because they have less formalities. But also, the having an entity gives more credibility as opposed to someone just running around with a script and individually trying to develop a project. If you have an entity, then that entity is what can own the intellectual property. That is where the rights can reside. The entity can track the third parties as needed. Maybe it's additional writers. Maybe it's bringing on the producer. Maybe it's attaching an actor. And it also is the mechanism from which that intellectual property can be exploited. So there can be advantages to have an entity, of course, and eventually, if the project is going to truly go forward, an entity is going to be needed to be formed. The question is when that occurs, because doing it prematurely, there are often tax implications in some states. For instance, in California, once you form an entity, you're going to owe the franchise tax board $800 at some point, no matter what you're doing. So it's something that it is prudent to do at some point, but it's not necessarily something that has to be done immediately.
I see. Yeah. Boy, $800. Man, that seems like a lot of money to for that.
Just to have an entity exist, yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of
Wow.
the many benefits to the working with the state of California. As I
I
as,
can see.
as I hope my answer was dripping with sarcasm.
Yes. Yeah, I could sense that coming across the camera. Those acting classes are paying off.
Oh, great, good to hear.
So let's say that I have got an idea. Let's say I've done some initial documenting of that idea. I've got it, a screenplay or whatever I have. Maybe I've even gone to the trouble of paying the $800 to get an LLC. Maybe I'm that far along. Now I really want to get into writing or filming or producing this idea. What kind of agreements am I going to need to be aware of or on the lookout for before I really start jumping in?
Well, it depends what you're doing. So you're talking about, say, for example, and this is a really significant issue, particularly with writers and independent producers, is writing and writing with other people. So let's say you have developed a treatment, a synopsis, or even a full blown screenplay. One mistake that often happens, and this is where a lot of creatives are not attuned to this, is they start working with others on this project. They have friends, others contribute to a script. And what they don't realize is that in the absence of an agreement, under copyright law, if multiple parties create one work, it is presumed the ownership rights and other rights are equal. So it's important to have a writer collaboration agreement. It can be pretty simple. And it's important to spell that out because you can have a situation where someone has actually done 90% of the work on a particular screenplay or a project, but because there's no agreement between the parties, under copyright law, it's presumed all the contributions are equal. So early on, it's important if someone is working with others and writing something and developing a project beyond the writing phase, that there are agreements in place. So when you're talking about going forward beyond just say now the writing of the script, if you're involving others, once you bring in producers, there should be agreements with them because what parties need to be aware of, creatives need to be aware of, is that they have to have something that's called chain of title, clean chain of title. Chain of title is simply all the agreements, releases, contracts, consents, all the agreements that give a particular production and entity the rights of ownership of a project and enable it to distribute it. And what happens is we're talking about like a chain. If there's any break in that chain, then the producer, the production company will not be able to distribute the project. So they have to get agreements all along the way with whoever they're working with, whoever's contributing to the project as a writer, as a producer, and then if they're shooting, if you're going on camera with actors, if you're using locations, everything needs to have agreements because all the necessary rights have to be secured in writing with proper agreements.
Okay, so that's interesting. You mentioned the chain of agreements that has to be in place. Is that the primary mechanism to also keep your idea from getting stolen or misused, or are there other, risks to be aware of?
It's an important part of it because it becomes, if someone tries to take something from you, let's say there's certainly, of course, there's been many lawsuits over copyright infringement where one party claims the script that they wrote was stolen and turned into a movie by another party. There's some lawsuits going on right now. There's a project that involves James Franco and I believe Brie Larson, in which there's some alleging like you just basically made our movie. So having your position is much stronger if you have it well established that if you have a script, register with the United States Copyright Office. Now that gives you protection, that gives you rights and remedies, but it doesn't stop people from stealing. Much like you can have a great security system in your home or on your car, it doesn't necessarily stop someone from stealing your car or breaking into your home. Having those protections, though, can mitigate the chances of it. And when you're talking about something that's more further developed, if you've taken your screenplay and maybe did a short film or something, a concept reel, that establishes it even further. So it makes it more difficult, but it also, at the same time, it's more about your ability as a producer or creative to exploit that project. Because if you're missing any agreements, the process is that once you develop, finance, and you produce a project, obviously you want to distribute it. And to distribute it, you're going to have to get errors and omissions insurance. No distributor will touch a film that doesn't have E&O insurance. To get E&O insurance, you got to be able to demonstrate to the insurer you own everything because they don't want to insure something that's just a beacon for lawsuits. So it's important that every step along the way, every link in the chain of title is there so that way you have all the rights you need to exploit your project.
So, James, I have to be honest, I am beginning to understand why you have a career in entertainment law. There's so much more here than I thought.
There's a lot. Entertainment law is I think you could say it's a general category for what involves intellectual property, often labor law. You have there's a lot of different layers to it, and it's extremely complicated, and especially when you take into account that the entertainment business is an international business. So you have implications for other countries as well, because not everybody's copyright intellectual property laws are the same. So there is a lot of different issues, and it is absolutely crucial that along the way, and not to justify our existence as entertainment attorneys, but it's why it really is important for creatives to get attorneys involved earlier than later, because I've seen it many times where we get involved later, and there is some breaks in the chain of title. We've seen situations where a film was flat out shot, produced, it's in the can, so to speak. And then we find out about an issue of chain of title that existed with the writer, that they based their screenplay on someone else's story and it wasn't properly secured. And that can become a nightmare. So, because people come out of the woodwork once something becomes successful. So all of a sudden, that friend that somebody worked with 3 years ago who wrote part of that script and that's your buddy at the time, all of a sudden, they're not so buddy anymore when they see your film on Netflix or something and wondering where's their piece. So that's why it's crucial to do that on the front end.
Yeah, I feel like that's, akin to winning the lottery, and all of a sudden you have all these cousins you never knew existed, and they all want something.
Yeah, except for some of them might actually have a legitimate claim.
Yeah.
Your cousins might not have a legitimate claim. They might have, a heartstrings claim, but someone who helped you write a script, and then later you go to sell that script, or you want to develop that script into a film, and you're producing it, and then it turns out this person emerges and says, "Well, I have rights too," and that's going to scare away distributors because no one wants to buy or get involved in a lawsuit. So that's why the errors and omission insurance is so important, because that's the protection for the distributors. because not just protecting the filmmakers. If a distributor, such as a studio, whether it's Warner Brothers or Universal or whoever, a Universal or Paramount, whoever it might be, they don't want lawsuits either. So that's why it's very important. You have to have all of the proper agreements necessary to have all the rights to allow you to exploit your project.
And just out of curiosity, do you work mainly with creators, or do you work with production companies? You kind of run the gamut with because it sounds like every party along the way needs legal representation.
Our representation runs a gamut. We work with a lot of independent producers and production companies, but we work with other creatives, and you alluded to at the top, writers or composers or so forth. So we represent them as well. But producer production companies, this is a lot of what we're talking about, because they are going to be taking a project, and there's the stages of it are essentially development, finance, production, distribution, to put it simply. And development is where you're maybe purchasing a script or hiring a writer. So obviously you got to have agreements for that. You may be attaching actors, you may be attaching producers to raise financing. And then and obviously some point in there, you need to create an entity, because before you can go raise money, before you can really enter into contracts with anybody, you need an entity. And all of that should be done with lawyers. People, they'll do things that, I'm going to say, penny wise, dollar foolish. It's an old saying, but it's still an applicable one, where go to LegalZoom and do it there, or try and get some agreements off the internet. And, maybe you get lucky and it works, but more often than not, I see there are defects in these things that can often come back to bite a producer. So, maybe they save some money on the front end, but it's much more expensive for attorneys to fix problems on the back end. And sometimes they can't be fixed. And so, when you're talking about who we represent across the board, but everybody can use legal advice, because as you alluded to, this is very complicated stuff.
Yeah. And do you think the biggest legal mistake among, creators is more, I'm just going to do it on the cheap, or is it more of an issue of I just don't know what I don't know?
I think it's a combination, and they might be interrelated, because they do it on the cheap because they don't know any better sometimes, or or maybe they're misled about that. Oh, this can be done without an attorney. This can be done this way. It doesn't make a difference. And look, sometimes the consequences are not felt, or they're not felt immediately. And it's later down the road that those consequences emerge. Like we've talked about, like if you wrote with somebody and you didn't have a writer collaboration agreement, you don't feel the effects of that right away. You might not feel the effects of it until after your project is out there. And like I said, it's on Netflix or it's in theaters. And now that person who can prove they helped write that script is like, hey, where's my check? So it's a little bit of it is a lack of knowledge, and sometimes it is. I don't think anyone intentionally wishes to save money to create a problem later. They think that they can save money and not create a problem. So it's kind of a combination of both.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, this is a very complicated topic, and one that may at least I didn't know anything about. So the next time I write a screenplay, I'm definitely calling you for sure. So thanks for being on the show today. Yeah, I look forward to having you on again.
I look forward to it. That'd be great.
Awesome. And for our listeners, thank you for listening to Cut to Legal with James Pacitti. Visit PacittiLawFirm.com to learn more or schedule a consultation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode. And with that, we hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much, John.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.